All right, let's jump right in, Italy. We've got a ton of material to cover today. It looks like we're diving into its geography, history, even the modern economy.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more than just the tourist highlights, that's for sure. Italy's got a lot more going on beneath the surface.
So much more, right? And I think most people have that sort of like that boot shape in their mind when they think of Italy. But is there more to its location than just that recognizable outline? I mean, geographically speaking.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Italy basically takes up this whole peninsula, the Apennine Peninsula, sticking right out into the Mediterranean. And that location, I mean, that's been so crucial to its history, surrounded by water, like a crossroads for trade, and a link between Europe and, well, everywhere else.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that central location has kind of been like a defining factor throughout history.
Exactly. And then you've got a bunch of countries bordering Italy, not to mention those two tiny states, Vatican City and San Marino, right there within its borders.
Pretty unique, right? Yeah, definitely a real mix of influences there. And speaking of variety, let's talk about the actual boot itself. No, it's not all beaches and sunshine, is it? I mean, I remember reading about some really diverse landscapes.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The geography is incredibly diverse. You've got the Alps up north, those towering peaks, and then the Po Valley, which is super fertile, and then running down the whole peninsula, almost like a spine, right? You've got the Apennine Mountains.
Wow, so it's like squeezing a whole continent into one country. And with all that variety in the terrain, I bet the climate changes a lot as you travel around too.
Oh, totally. You could literally be skiing in the Alps one day and then basking on a beach in Sicily the next. It's pretty wild. Each region has its own microclimate shaped by, everything. The mountains, the sea, you name it.
Okay, so that explains all the amazing regional food. I mean, those microclimates must be perfect for growing all those delicious ingredients. But you mentioned Sicily. Didn't they set like a crazy weather record there?
Haha, yeah, you're right. The highest temperature ever recorded in Europe, a scorching 48.5 degrees Celsius. That was in Sicily. Talk about a contrast to the snowy Alps, right?
Wow, that's a huge temperature swing. So, okay, we've got this incredibly diverse landscape and a climate that goes from freezing to scorching, all in one boot-shaped country. No wonder Italy has such a long and interesting history. But where do we even begin? We're talking about like thousands of years, right?
Yeah, millennia. It can be kind of overwhelming to think about all those layers of history, but I think a few key eras really stand out. First, you've got the Roman Empire, of course, the rise and fall of Rome. You can still see its legacy everywhere you go in Italy. Then there's the Renaissance, that explosion of art and culture, which, changed the whole Western world, really. And finally, the unification of Italy in the 19th century, which was a pretty complicated process.
Yeah, I was just blown away when I visited Rome. It's, like you said, a living museum. Ancient ruins right next to these incredible Renaissance masterpieces, and it's all buzzing with modern life.
Exactly. It's that mix that makes Italy so unique. Every historical period, whether it's the Romans, the Renaissance, the unification, it's all left its mark on the art, the architecture, even the political system. You can't really separate Italian identity from its history.
Yeah, it's like a tapestry woven with threads from different centuries.
Yeah.
But it's not just a museum, right? I mean, the 20th century had some pretty big upheavals for Italy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The 20th century was tough. Fascism, World War II, it was a really difficult time for the country. And those events, they definitely left a mark, But out of all that turmoil, they established the Republic. And that set the stage for modern Italy, the Italy we see today.
So even with that shared past, those common threads, something that really stood out to me is how Italy is really a nation of regions, with each area having its own unique character and, in some cases, even a certain amount of autonomy. So it's not really just one big uniform culture, is it?
Right. You can't really look at Italy as like a single homogenous entity. It's more like a puzzle, with 20 distinct pieces. Each region has its own flavor, its own culture, sometimes even its own dialect. And they're all pretty proud of that regional identity.
That makes so much sense. Can you give us an example of how that regionalism plays out in the real world, I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Think about South Tyrol. It's in the north, borders Austria, and a lot of people there speak German. Plus, their culture has a lot of Alpine influences. It's just one example of how diverse Italy can be within its own borders.
So you could travel within Italy and almost feel like you're experiencing different countries, different cultures, different food, even different languages, all under the same flag. It's kind of amazing. And I bet that regional diversity is a big part of why Italy is such a popular tourist destination, too. There's always something new to see and experience.
Oh, definitely. But when most people think about the Italian economy, they think tourism, right? Fashion, maybe some gourmet food exports, but I think there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, from what I've read, it sounds like there's way more going on than just gondolas and Gucci handbags.
Exactly. I mean, those are important, of course. But you might be surprised to know that Italy's a manufacturing powerhouse. We're talking about cars. Some of the most iconic sports cars in the world are made in Italy. And get this, Italy is the world's top wine producer.
Wow, top wine producer. I mean, I knew Italian wine was good, but I didn't realize they were #1. What else are we missing about the Italian economy?
Well, they're known for their craftsmanship and design, of course, especially in, fashion, furniture, food production. There's a whole level of industry and economic diversity that people often overlook.
It seems like Italy is full of surprises. It's not just about that romantic image we see in movies. There's this real strength and resilience to the economy.
Absolutely. But let's be real, there are some challenges too. One of the biggest is the north-south divide. Basically, there's a gap in economic development between the industrialized north and the more agricultural south. It's a complex issue with a lot of historical and political roots.
So even with all this innovation and diversity, there are still inequalities they're dealing with. It's a good reminder that even in a country that seems so picture perfect, there are people facing real-world problems. But I think that's exactly what we're trying to do here, right? Challenge those assumptions and get a more nuanced view of Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about getting beyond the stereotypes.
Oh. Okay, so we've covered the geography, the history, the economy, and it's clear that Italy is way more complex than most people realize. But what about the people? I'm really interested to learn more about Italian society and how it's changing in the modern world.
That's a great next step. When we talk about Italian society, we're talking about millions of individuals. But there are definitely some common threads that weave them together, some shared experiences and values.
So where do we even begin? How do we understand a population that's so big and diverse? Are there any trends that really stand out?
One of the most significant trends in recent decades is the declining birth rate and the aging of the population. Italy, like a lot of developed countries, is facing the challenges of an older society.
So fewer babies and more seniors. I can see how that would have a big impact on the country. What are some of the implications of this demographic shift?
Well, it puts a strain on Social Security. Fewer young people working means fewer people contributing to support retirees. And it can also impact economic growth because you have a shrinking workforce.
This sounds pretty serious. Are there any efforts to address this?
Oh, definitely. The government is trying to encourage couples to have more kids, things like financial incentives, more access to childcare. But it's tough. There are other factors at play: job security, the cost of housing, the changing role of women in society. It's a big puzzle.
It reminds us that even in a beautiful country like Italy, people are facing real challenges. And it makes me wonder how these changes are affecting traditional social structures. Like, what role does family play in Italy today? I have this image of these big multi-generational families having these huge Sunday dinners. Is that still a thing?
Haha, yeah, that image isn't too far off. Family is still incredibly important in Italian culture. Close-knit families, strong bonds between generations, it's all very much alive. You're right about those Sunday dinners too. They're still a huge tradition. Big tables full of homemade pasta, roast meat, everyone together. It's a beautiful thing.
I can practically smell the food.
Yeah.
But I bet it's not always easy, right? Balancing that strong sense of family with, being an individual, especially for young people, is there tension there between tradition and modern life?
There can be, for sure. Young adults might want to move away for work or school, but there's that expectation to stay close to family. And those family ties, well, sometimes they can make it hard to break free from those traditional expectations.
Yeah, it's like a universal struggle, right?
Yeah.
Finding that balance between independence and family. But speaking of family and tradition, we have to talk about food. In Italy, food is so much more than just fuel. It's part of social gatherings, family traditions, even regional identity.
Absolutely. Food is a way to express love, tradition, even regional pride. Sharing a meal is like a ritual. It's a way to connect and celebrate. And each region, with its unique climate and history, has its own specialties, recipes that have been passed down through generations.
Okay, you've got to give me an example. What's a dish that really embodies that connection between food and culture?
Well, let's take pasta. It's a staple in Italy, right? but it's so much more than just noodles. Every region has its own shapes, sauces, preparation methods. You go to Bologna, you get that rich ragu served with tagliatelle. In Rome, it's all about cacio e pepe, simple but delicious. Pecorino cheese and black pepper. And then you go to the coast and you have all these amazing seafood pastas, each one reflecting what's caught locally.
It's amazing how much variation there is, just with pasta. But beyond food, what else defines Italian culture? What are some of those core values?
One that comes to mind is la bella figura. It translates to like the beautiful figure, but it's more than just looks. It's about presenting yourself well in every aspect of life. Your style, your manners, your behavior.
So it's like making a good impression, being respectful, putting your best foot forward.
Exactly. It's about elegance and grace. There's this Italian word sprezzatura, which is kind of hard to translate, but it's like an effortless style. It's woven into everything in Italy, from fashion to social interactions.
It sounds like a value that really elevates daily life.
Yeah.
Makes it more artful, more intentional. Are there any other traditions that really capture that spirit?
Well, there's the passeggiata, the evening stroll. It's a time to socialize, catch up with neighbors, see and be seen, just enjoy being out and about.
I love that. Like a nightly ritual that brings the community together. It reminds me of those little towns in Italy. Everyone knows everyone, and life just moves at a slower pace.
Exactly, and it ties into another important aspect of Italian culture. Il dolce far niente. It means the sweetness of doing nothing.
The sweetness of doing nothing. Okay, I have to know more. Does that mean Italians are just lazy?
Not at all. It's about embracing leisure time, taking time to savor those simple pleasures, like a long lunch with friends, a coffee break, enjoying a beautiful sunset. It's about slowing down, appreciating the moment.
That's something we could all learn from, right? In our fast-paced world, learning to appreciate those moments of peace and connection. It sounds like Italians have really mastered that balance between work and life, between tradition and modern life.
Yeah, I think they do a pretty good job of it. But we also have to acknowledge that Italian society, like any other, faces challenges. We talked about the demographic shifts and the economic disparities, but there are other issues they're dealing with.
So what are some of the things that are top of mind for Italians these days?
One big one is political instability. Italy has a history of fragile coalition governments. So there are a lot of changes in leadership, and it can be hard to implement long-term reforms.
I bet that gets frustrating for people.
Yeah.
It must make them feel pretty cynical about politics.
It does, and that cynicism has led to the rise of some populist movements on both the left and the right. They tend to exploit those feelings of frustration and anxiety. It's not unique to Italy, though. We're seeing it all over the world.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in a country with such a rich history and culture, there are still deep divisions. What about immigration? I know that's been a big issue in Europe. How's Italy handling it?
Well, Italy's location in the Mediterranean means it's become a major destination for migrants and refugees, people fleeing conflict and poverty in Africa and the Middle East. It's a really complicated issue with a lot of different angles to consider: humanitarian, economic, social.
I can see how it would be a sensitive topic. Are there a lot of different opinions on it? Within Italy, I mean.
There's a lot of compassion. A lot of Italians are very welcoming to immigrants. They recognize their contributions and want to help. But there are also anxieties, concerns about resources, the job market, and some people worry about the impact on Italian culture.
It sounds like it reflects that global debate we're having about immigration.
Yeah.
Brings up so many difficult questions about identity, economics, social justice. There are no easy answers.
Exactly. And how Italy navigates this issue will have a huge impact on its future, both as a nation and as part of Europe.
It's a lot to think about, but I think it's important to remember that even with all these challenges, Italian society is strong and vibrant. We've talked about the importance of family, the love of food, the concept of la bella figura, and the art of il dolce far niente. These are all expressions of a culture that values connection, beauty, and really just enjoying life.
That's a great way to put it.
So we've explored the social fabric of Italy, from the joys of those family gatherings to the challenges they're facing. It's a country full of contrasts, complexities, and deep-rooted traditions. But if you had to choose one key takeaway about Italian society for our listener, what would it be?
I think it's the resilience. Despite all the challenges, Italian society is incredibly vibrant. The traditions, the passion for food and art and culture, the strong family bonds, those are the things that define the Italian spirit.
Beautifully said. And it makes me even more excited to dive into the next part of our exploration, Italian language and culture. Are you ready to continue the journey?
Absolutely. Let's explore the sounds, the words, the stories that make Italian culture so captivating.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back with part 2 of our deep dive into Italy. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. So we just finished talking about the some of the bigger social and economic forces at play in Italy, but I'm really excited to dig into something a little more personal, like Italian language and culture. It's what really captures, I think, the heart and soul of the country.
Yeah, for sure. I've always loved the sound of Italian. It's so expressive, almost musical.
You're right. It really does sing. People always say that Italian is a language that sings, and even everyday conversations can sound, well, almost poetic. I mean, it is the language of Dante, of opera, of passionate love letters, and of course, those iconic hand gestures.
Oh, the hand gesture. It's like a whole other language and on top of the spoken words.
It really is. Italians are masters of nonverbal communication. I mean, a shrug, a wave of the hand, a raised eyebrow, they can all convey so much.
I remember trying to learn some basic phrases before a trip, and I quickly realized that the words were only half the battle. You have to get those gestures, the facial expressions, the whole context to really understand what's going on.
Exactly. It's those cultural nuances, They go way beyond just a literal translation of the words, and that's what makes it so fascinating, that interplay between language and culture.
So let's talk about the language itself. I know it comes from Latin, like the other Romance languages.
Yeah.
But what makes Italian unique from, like, a linguistic perspective?
Well, one thing that's really interesting about Italian is its incredible regional diversity. Standard Italian is the official language, but as you travel around, you'll hear all these different dialects, and they reflect centuries of local history, local culture. Some of them are so different, they're almost like separate languages.
Wow, so it's like a family of languages, all within one country.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's not just about accents either. The dialects have different vocabularies, different grammar, even their own literary traditions sometimes.
It's amazing how language can be like a living record of a region's past.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of how the dialects differ?
Sure. Take Sicilian, for instance. It's spoken on the island of Sicily, and it has influences from Arabic, Greek, even Norman French, because Sicily was this crossroads of cultures for centuries, and it sounds totally different from the Italian spoken in, say, Florence or Milan.
That's fascinating. So we have this incredible linguistic diversity, but are there other features of Italian that really stand out to you?
I think what always strikes me is just how expressive it is. It's a language full of emotion, nuances, double meanings. Even simple phrases can have this layered complexity to them.
Yeah, I've heard people say that Italian is a language of the heart, a language that's meant to be felt, not just understood.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it's reflected in the way Italians use language. There's so much passion, humor, a kind of theatrical flair. They're not afraid to use their voices, their hands, their whole bodies to communicate.
So learning Italian is about so much more than just memorizing grammar rules, right? It's about immersing yourself in a whole way of being, a whole way of expressing yourself.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with that culture that lives and breathes through the language.
Okay, so we've talked about the linguistic landscape. Now let's shift gears and talk about Italian culture. What are some of the core values, the beliefs that shape the Italian way of life?
Well, we already touched on a few of them, like the importance of family familia and that idea of la bella figura, presenting yourself well, making a good impression.
Yeah, those really resonated with me. There's this sense of elegance, respect, intentionality that seems to run through so much of Italian culture.
And then, of course, there's il dolce far niente, that appreciation for the sweetness of doing nothing, taking time to savor life's simple pleasures. It's a reminder to slow down, relax, appreciate the moment.
That's a beautiful concept. I think we could all use a little more dolce far niente in our lives. It's about finding that balance between work and leisure, striving and just being.
You got it. And all of these values, family, la bella figura, il dolce far niente, they all contribute to this uniquely Italian art of living.
It's making me want to book a flight to Italy right now. But beyond the romantic stereotypes of gondolas and pasta, what's the one thing you want our listener to remember about Italian language and culture?
I think it's this. Italian culture is a celebration of life. In all its richness and complexity, it's about passion, beauty, connection, and like we said, the art of living well. And the language itself reflects that. It's a tool for expressing all those things, the joys, the sorrows, the humor, the drama. It's all there.
That's beautifully put. And I think what really sums it up is that phrase, la dolce vita, the sweet life. It's more than just a phrase, it's a whole way of being.
Exactly. It's about savoring the moment, appreciating beauty, connecting with people, and finding joy in those simple, everyday things.
So to our listener, we encourage you to explore the world of Italian language and culture. Learn a few phrases, try a new recipe, just take a moment to appreciate the beauty around you. There's something truly special about embracing that Italian way of life.
And who knows, you might even find a little bit of la dolce vita within yourself.
I love that. Grazie mille for joining us on this deep dive into Italy. Ciao for now.
Okay, so we've talked about the land, the history, the people, the economy, even some of the social challenges facing Italy today. But now, I'm ready for the fun stuff. The language, the art, the culture, all the things that make Italy so vibrant and captivating.
Me too. I mean, this is where it all comes together, right? The heart and soul of what makes Italy so special. And I think for a lot of people, it starts with the language.
Oh, for sure. Italian just sounds so beautiful, so romantic. Even simple phrases seem to have so much more passion, so much more feeling.
It's true. It's like every word is infused with emotion, with a certain musicality, I guess you could say.
Yeah, musicality, that's the perfect word for it. I mean, it is the language of opera, after all. And those hand gestures, you can't forget those. It's like a whole other language on top of the spoken words.
It is. It's like, you can say so much with just a shrug, a wave of the hand, a raised eyebrow. Italians are masters of nonverbal communication. I remember trying to learn some Italian before a trip, and I quickly realized that the words were only half the battle. You have to understand the gestures, the facial expressions, the whole context to really get what someone is saying.
Exactly. It's all about those cultural nuances. You can't just translate the words directly. You have to understand the culture behind them. And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? That interplay between language and culture.
Okay, so let's dive into the language itself. I know Italian is a Romance language, like Spanish and French. They all come from Latin, right? But what makes Italian unique?
Well, one of the most interesting things about Italian is its incredible regional diversity. I mean, yeah, there's standard Italian, the official language, but as you travel around the country, you'll hear all these different dialects.
Dialects, so like different accents.
So it's way more than just accents. These dialects have their own vocabulary, their own grammar, sometimes even their own literary traditions. It's pretty amazing.
So it's almost like Italy has a family of languages within its borders.
Exactly. And these dialects, they reflect centuries of local history, local culture. Some of them are so different from each other, they're almost like separate languages.
Wow, I had no idea. Can you give me an example of how the dialects differ, I mean?
Sure. Think about Sicilian, the dialect spoken on the island of Sicily. It's got influences from Arabic, Greek, even Norman French, because Sicily was this crossroads of cultures for centuries. And it sounds totally different from the Italian you'd hear in, say, Rome or Venice.
That's so cool. It's like language is a living record of a region's past. So we've got this incredible linguistic diversity, but are there any other features of Italian, like as a language, that stand out to you?
One thing that always strikes me is just how expressive Italian is. It's a language that's so full of emotion, of nuance, of layers of meaning. I mean, even simple phrases can have this incredible depth to them.
It's like it's a language that's spoken from the heart,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And it's reflected in the way Italians use language. There's so much passion, so much humor. They're not afraid to use their voices, their hands, their whole bodies to communicate.
So learning Italian is about so much more than just like memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules. It's about immersing yourself in a whole way of being.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with the culture that lives and breathes through the language.
I love that. So we've talked about the language. Now let's get into the culture itself. What are some of the core values, the beliefs that really define Italian culture?
Well, we've already talked about a few of them, right? Like the importance of family familia and that concept of la bella figura, presenting yourself well, making a good impression.
Yeah, those really stood out to me. They speak to a sense of, a sense of grace, a sense of pride that seems to be such a big part of Italian culture.
Exactly. And then there's il dolce far niente, that appreciation for the sweetness of doing nothing, taking time to enjoy those simple pleasures, like a long lunch with friends, a leisurely coffee break, just soaking up the beauty of a sunset. It's about slowing down, appreciating the moment.
Il dolce far niente. I love that. I think we could all use a little more of that in our lives.
Yeah.
That ability to just be present, to savor the moment. It sounds like Italians have really found that balance. that balance between work and life, between striving and just being.
They really have. And all of these values, family, la bella figura e dolce far niente, they all come together to create this very special Italian art of living.
It makes you want to experience it for yourself, doesn't it? Go to Italy, soak it all in.
Yeah.
But beyond the stereotypes, the gondolas and the pasta, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all this about Italian language and culture?
I think it's this. Italian culture is a celebration of life in all its richness and complexity. It's about passion, beauty, connection, and of course the art of living well. And the language, it's a reflection of all that. It's a tool for expressing the full spectrum of human experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think it all comes back to that idea of la dolce vita, the sweet life. It's more than just a phrase, it's a way of being.
Exactly. It's about savoring each moment, appreciating the beauty around us, connecting with the people we love, and finding joy in the simple things.
So to our listeners who have joined us on this deep dive into Italy, we encourage you to explore this world for yourselves. Learn a few Italian phrases, try a new recipe, or just take a moment to appreciate the beauty around you. Embrace that Italian way of life and see what it brings to your world.
And who knows, you might even discover a little bit of la dolce vita within yourself.
Grazie mille for joining us on this journey. Ciao!